Good afternoon. You're watching AB Live, a brand new news-based chat show in which we discuss topics ranging from business, news, politics, and so much more. On today's episode, we will be discussing the transformations in the construction sector, and for that, we are in the Trimble office right now. And with me in the studios, we have Paul Wallet and we have Dennis McNellis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, so firstly, I need to ask you about what you do and what exactly the company portfolio is. So let's start with you, Paul. So tell us more about Trimble and Trimble Solutions.
So Trimble, we're really a technology provider for the various industries, but talking specifically about construction, we have various software solutions that are used within the industry, as well hardware solutions, so positioning devices, GPS devices, machine control devices. So if you see the big digger going down on the construction site, today we have technology that actually knows the location and tells the machine where they should go do the grading. We have robotic total stations, so you'll see those yellow boxes on site with site surveyors.
Right.
So today these are very intelligent machines which are robots, and they actually will point laser beams exactly where somebody should be doing the layout, or laser technology, which will do point clouds of the existing construction so that you can bring that back into the digital world, do redesigns or do verification. So a lot of different solutions that are really geared in terms of digitizing the process of construction and helping to make the construction more efficient, more cost effective.
Right. There's a lot about digitization that we need to discuss during the course of this show. But before that, Dennis, coming to you, we know that BAM International is a construction company. But what are the major projects you're working on currently?
As BAM International, which is part of the Royal BAM Group, which is a worldwide organisation, but BAM International focuses on essentially international projects as opposed to local projects. So in this region, we're currently working on the Museum of the Future and also on the Yas Arena down in Abu Dhabi, which are two large projects. We also do civil work, so marines work. So we've done work up in Ras Al Khaimah and we're doing work in Jebel Ali. And then around the region, we're also in Africa, we're in Singapore, we're all over the world essentially. So very, very large.
Great. Again, you've mentioned some really, really important large projects, and I'm sure you also work with a number of projects which we'll get into. But just before that, to give our viewers an overview of the state of the construction sector right now, which is one of the most prominent sectors in the UAE and in the wider GCC. So can you just give us an overview of the state of the sector?
So speaking globally, construction worth is about $13 trillion. So it's a huge area of construction when we talk in the global perspective. From the GCC or the UAE point of view, I think it's about $300 billion or $313 billion of actual construction. That is about 4,000 active projects that are running within the region. That's broken down into different sectors, so transportation and built construction and so on. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of different projects ongoing or at tender phase in the region.
Right, and if you had to give me an overview of where the sector is heading towards, Paul has just mentioned some huge numbers again, but where do you see the entire industry going towards in the coming years?
If you take the industry, by its nature, is very dynamic. You'll have lean periods and very, very busy periods. I suppose locally at the moment, with the Expo coming up in next year, there's a lot of focus on completing projects for that, so that the vision of Dubai is shown to the rest of the world. Right? The projects which we are working on are all to be completed well in advance of that, and then future offers. There's going to be a growth from that, according to the information that's been provided, that we will be moving forward into a more dynamic environment. Focus at the moment is on infrastructure and preparations for Expo.
All All right, so again, Expo, very, very important topic. I think Expo is affecting all industries across the region right now. But what is the sort of investment that construction or the country has put into the construction when it comes to Expo 2020?
Investment in terms of technology. So obviously there's various pavilions that are going on. And a couple of those pavilions our customers have used our technology to enable them to do the complex fabrication, because we're typically at the execution end, so from the engineering through to the fabrication side of it. With these complex buildings, you need specialized modeling solutions to enable today, these types of projects to be created accurately and within a certain time period. So from the investment from the customer's point of view, they're investing in our different softwares, and then out on site they may be investing in the robotic total stations that I mentioned, or laser equipment. So really to execute, if we look back many years ago, the environment has completely changed. It's swung massively around, that we probably wouldn't see the types and natures of buildings we had 20, 30 years ago to what we have today.
Right.
And so technology has enabled quite fancy and architectural challenging projects to be realized, today in the industry.
All right, I would agree, and I think I need to come to you for that, because Museum of the Future is one of those examples of evolution that Paul just spoke about here. But I would like to know, how is it that you have actually imbibed technology and embraced technology and the solutions that a company like Trimble would provide in that particular project?
If you take the nature of the work that we do in BAM International, is we typically go for the more complex work. And because of that, we've invested very heavily over the years in 3D technology, implementation, visualization, planning process. Obviously, with the nature of the Museum of the Future, it's 3D. Everything is 3D. So we actually have a full 3D model for steel, concrete, everything internally, so that we can coordinate and ensure that everything fits together before we build it. So it's all part and parcel of solve the problem before you try and build the problem.
All right.
Which is the typical industry. 15 years ago, the technology wouldn't have been there to allow us to do that. But by investing early, it means we're in a position to utilize it on projects like that. So we're using it on that, we're using it on YAS, we used it on the airport in Africa that's just opened yesterday. So it's in our DNA now at this stage.
All right, so obviously 3D is one of the solutions that Museum of the Future has actually accepted and embraced. But apart from that, do you think technology and just the whole acceptance of technology in most of your projects has also provided a cost efficiency, or has this come with an added cost?
The industry is very cost sensitive, and you wouldn't be using it if it was costing you. So there has to be a benefit, and we see tangible benefits, because it means it's a lot cheaper to solve something on a drawing board than it is when it's built.
Right.
And when you're doing simple rectangular buildings, it's not so difficult. When you're doing complex buildings, you've got mechanical services snaking around complex steel shapes and everything else, then you really see the benefits. There's a lot of upfront time spent planning it and ensuring that it works, but once it's in place, it goes a lot smoother on site.
All right, so the reason I ask you is, of course, in the offices, we definitely see the use of technology, emerging technologies, not just we see machine learning, we see artificial intelligence, but on site, what do you think is going to be more effective? I know we spoke about this earlier, Paul, where we were talking about in this market where labor is available for a relatively cheaper rate, we have inexpensive labor accessibility. Would you say that just moving towards AI would be the smarter option, and would contractors and construction companies want to do that given the market situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. AI is an emerging technology or a way of working. Initially, you need the information, so you need that big data to effectively plan and use how you are going to utilize AI. So if we look at some of the research and development projects that Trimble has and actually has shown to be working is the automation of heavy equipment moving around on the job site. So what we've done with the collective technologies that we have, we've fitted different sensors and then with the big data enabled JCB diggers to move around the job site to loading points of where earth needs to be moved. But in that process, obviously you're going to have, and then when we talk about health and safety, labour force that could potentially walk in front of that JCB. So those sensors actually detect that person as a hazard and will actually stop in its tracks and let that person move out of the way and continue. So that's kind of part and parcel of machine learning is to enable automation to start to happen.
So automation isn't really replacing labor then, it's just facilitating easier and smoother functioning.
It's part of the process. So when we talk about the heavy machinery, there's one utilization or use of AI there. When we look at labor force, where we are actually managing the optimal amount of labor on site, because as you mentioned, inherently we see, a vast amount of labor that actually on the construction sites. Do we need that amount of labor when we, if we look at other areas like Europe or the US, where the cost of a tradesman is very high, then they are going to look at better utilization of those labor people on site because it's an added expense.
Right.
So optimizing where the labor is to be on a job site, making better use of those individuals. We have technology such as CrewSight, for example, that can actually track labor. So just in the first instant, enabling a fast deployment of your labor into the site itself. We see all these turnstiles. So even before the labor force gets on the job site, we have special scanning equipment through RFI readers, and what that will do, it will detect who that person is and what his relevant qualifications are in terms of, has he had his medical checks, is he got the right certification,
right,
should he be here today, and once he's passed those mandatory checks, then he can get through the turnstile.
Right.
And then when he's on the site, we can track based on where he should be scheduled for that particular day, which part of the site he should actually be working on. Or you can actually change, if there's too many people at a particular location, then the software will actually note that up, and then you can make sure people are where they should be at what particular time.
Interesting. So I don't really see a direct replacement happening. What do you think, Dennis, of that? Do you think that level of automation is really required in this region when you talk about on-site?
I think the question would need to be asked as to, we've got multiple parts to the problem. We've got the design stage, we've got the fabrication initial off-site stage, and then we've got the on-site stage. The on-site stage is particularly challenging from that point of view, because to automate it is very difficult. When you're doing your preparatory work for delivery to site and your planning, automation could come into play in those environments because the investment is worth the return. You get a return out of it. When you're on site, it's very, very dynamic. In the region, obviously weather will affect you. Unlike in Europe where it will rain, if it's too hot and the guys can't work outdoors, you're not really going to be able to do anything.
Right.
Technology struggles with temperature.
Yeah.
So in the region we have challenges specific to the region in that it's just too hot for certain things. And humans, unfortunately for some of them, are much more adaptable, so they can work in environments which are difficult.
Agreed. Well,
So technology is an enabler, but it isn't necessarily a solution.
all right, great. So, well then, what exactly would you say are the emerging trends then that is sort of suited for this region?
So I think, as Dennis alluded to, prefabrication, off-site construction is something that I hear more and more of. People going in that direction. That they're building ready-made modules that, like bathrooms, for example, with all the plumbing and electrical items. Everything's fitted, and they can just take that module and then take it to site and then load it into place. If we look at the demand for housing, and if we talk wider into the GCC, so we look at Saudi with a huge increase in housing that they're looking at, which is, I think, 1.5 million houses that they're going to build.
Right.
The methodology that they need to deploy to construct all those houses has to involve either advanced technologies. They've looked at 3D printing. They're also actively using off-site construction, such as precast. So they can, and they're investigating other types of construction. I think one of the precast examples, it was, I think, 48 hours, and they actually erected and built the house on site. So it's a good.
That's quick.
It's very quick.
Yeah.
There is behind of that, of course, there's a lead-in. So in precast, you're making the different walls and slabs in advance, and then they just get kind of bolted together.
Right.
So it's a bit like a Meccano or Lego set, let's say, where you go to site and then you just plug all these slabs. So you have to cast the foundation first, but then it's a rapid process to build the actual house on site. So
it's incredible. I mean, you have a lot of experience with 3D printing and the technology there. So would you say for a project like Paul just mentioned, 1.5 million houses in Saudi, do you think 3D printing is the best solution then?
3D printing has particular advantages if it's an organic type of shape, a difficult shape. If it's a regular repetitive shape, generally it's more cost effective, shall we say, to standardize a mold, and you can make 1,000 of the same item.
Right.
3D printing, if you want to make one unique item of a particular strength, you can do that. The technology has a long way to go at the moment, because without getting technical, concrete is strong, but only if it's been squeezed.
Right.
If you pull it, it'll pull apart. So you've got to put material into it to make it strong. 3D printing is a challenge. They're still trying to find good solutions to that problem. So for particular problems, it will work really well. And for your general, say your million houses, it won't be as beneficial maybe, except for very, very specific parts of it.
All right.
But that is something we're looking at as well as a company. We actually have a division that is currently looking into 3D printing on elements.
Right.
But it's at the early stages because it's a very, very young technology in the construction industry.
Right, and you've obviously spoken about one of the main challenges of 3D printing technology. Again, we appreciate you being honest about it with us. But apart from that, what are the main challenges of the sector right now, of the construction sector in the GCC?
That's a good question. Challenges, I think adoption of technologies throughout the whole process is a challenge. The industry has been deploying digitization quite heavily for the past few years now, in more in the engineering part of the business. When it gets down to taking that information, digitize, and then translating that through the whole process, this is where investment in technology is probably needed more. Because if we look at where the big cost is, as soon as you deploy labor, crews, materials to site, that's where the cost escalates. It's not in the engineering office. The engineering office takes care of preemptive costs in terms of making sure everything is coordinated properly.
Right.
But what the industry is working on and is still advancing in is taking that digital information and then executing that, taking that throughout the whole process.
Right.
We're very well, if we look at subcontractors, they've been using the 3D kind of manufacturing principles for a number of years now. Like on Museum of the Future, like on a lot of these structural steel type projects, you can see that typically they'll manufacture that building because it's made with specialized machinery, CNC. Everything fits together nicely, goes to site, and typically it will go together. And then when we get to the other trades, so MEP is an emerging technology.
Yeah.
So they're using specialized technology for MEP HVAC fabrication and actually fit out on the field. So those two trades, which make up a huge cost in the building. So if we talk about if you can get the main structure and what I would call the veins of the building, those two working efficiently and being constructed in the best manner, then the rest of the fit out should actually work very well after it. So you're kind of benefiting the other trades.
Okay.
When we talk at the general contractor level, adoption is starting to emerge, but you could say it's if we take the vast amount of contractors in the GCC, it's at very early stages.
All right.
So they typically they may start out with a BIM, building information model, but then they go back more to a traditional process because they've not gone through all the different processes in the organization, and that's really where the biggest cost is. So the biggest saving that the industry can make is start to really innovate and adapt technologies throughout.
But there's also
process.
a confidence issue right now in the market, right? Considering we've gone through an economic downturn, an economic slump. So probably innovation is something scary for people who are trying things that they're not used to. Could also be scary for especially the smaller businessmen.
I totally agree on that fact that do I invest? Because whatever technologies you're buying, there's a cost related to that. So do I invest right now when I'm struggling to find a project, or I'm having to win a project at a very low margin?
Right.
The reverse, I would say, of that is technology is there and it's designed to make you much more efficient. It's there to optimize your process. So you're actually, by investing in technology, you can reduce the amount of labor that we spoke about earlier and be much more efficient on site and have far less wastage of material, and also the errors that you may typically have on these projects that are run in a general way. Historically, those errors are always there.
All right.
Human element, we're not infallible, we make mistakes.
Okay.
Technology is designed to try and remove not the human element, let's say, but those mistakes.
At least the errors, of course.
The
yes.
errors, yeah.
Just reminding our viewers again, we're watching AB Live, and we are here to discuss the transformations in the construction sector. With us is Paul Wallet and Dennis McNellis, who is working for BAM International, and one of their projects is, of course, the Museum of the Future. So I think everyone is interested to know more about the project. So if you can just quickly tell our viewers a little bit about the project, whatever you can reveal to us right now.
Well, I suppose it's a very visible project and
yes,
everybody
it is.
I think one of the things about the project when we started in 2017 was you didn't see it because it was in the ground and it'd take a long time to come out of the ground. Getting it up to concrete level, and then we started putting on the steel frame, which is what Eversandai did for us, and that's the big donut, if we want to call it that. Very complex structure. Reality is the nature of it. It was from the get-go, when it went out to tender and everything was 3D. Both the architect, the engineers, the whole design team had worked in 3D. We did our tender and our presentations in 3D. and we've continued throughout the whole process because the requirement of the tender was that it is a 100% BIM project.
Right.
So that has meant that we have had to actually support some of our smaller subcontractors who don't have the technology. They have their conventional methods, and we've supported it, so we have a full 3D model of everything that's in the building. This has enabled us to identify challenges and work around them before we physically do them on site. Obviously the location is very visible, so people can see how it's progressing and that it's moving forward at a continuous rate. And the one thing for me, that the most amazing thing about the project is the actual shape and the cladding. Structurally it is an extremely complex building.
Yeah.
And yet it's a very simple form. So the tools have allowed the design to come out with the oval with the hole in the middle. But to try and construct that is not easy.
Right.
And by using the technology, it allows us to do that. But the most important thing is when you come to the facade and you see all the writing, which is phrases and poems from Sheikh, that is all glass. And the shape is, every single panel on that building is unique.
Oh, wow.
So if you look at any conventional building, the glazing is a standardized panel or a very modular panel. Whereas we have over 1,000 unique panels on this building. And technology now is the only thing that allows that to be done.
And from a construction point of view, what was the most difficult aspect of it while building it?
What I can say is that in my career, I have never come across as many challenges in one project. And yet the project is by its nature a challenge, which is why I'm thrilled to be involved in it, because that's, as an engineer, that's all I want, is give me challenges. And I'm actually normalized now. So what I do on a daily basis on this project, I come across so many different challenges that if I was on any other project, any one of these would be enough for the project. From dealing with the complex concrete reinforcement, everything is organic in nature in the shape of the building, so it's not the easiest shape to build.
Right.
To the steelwork, which Eversand I did, to the facade, which has been done by a fan, to the internal lining, which is plasterboard, but it's not straight walls, it's all curved walls, it's projected through. To the MEP, who have to find a way of routing electrical and plumbing and air conditioning around all this shape. It's all drawn.
Okay.
And it's all worked out, and we know where it's going, and then they come on site and they use their total stations to set it out, because it's not a building where you can take out a tape measure and measure off a line, because there's no straight lines.
Right.
So that's the thing about a building of this nature. Everything is curving, and everything is challenging. So we use everything.
I'm sure it is, but I think the best thing is, like you mentioned earlier, that we can see the progress. Anyone who's driving on Sheikh Zayed Road can actually see the progress of the building. Now coming to you, we were talking about the challenges. Just on those lines, one of the major problems that the GCC has had, or one of the black marks in the GCC's construction sector, essentially has been project delivery, which has been a challenge. So is there anything being done to sort of rectify that, or just take that black mark out of the GCC's construction sector?
It's not just the GCC, by the way. I mean, this is an inherent worldwide issue that we have globally. I think 90% of projects tend to overrun on time. So really, is there anything specific? I think it's many different things that contribute to enabling projects to execute within the schedule. So as we said, prefabrication is one methodology, because you're actually getting everything fixed before you go to the job site. You know things are going to fit together. Then the utilization of your right tools and assets and where they are. So if you, for example, hypothetically, if you're going on site, you're a labourer and you need to find a drill,
right,
and you don't know where it is, then you're wasting time, because you could be, half an hour or an hour searching for your specific asset. And so these technologies that we have are actually tracking the assets as well.
Okay.
So it's not just the big things, but it's also the small things that all feed in and contribute to the overall issue that we have with the scheduling.
All right. Coming to you now, Dennis. Again, Yas Marina and of course Museum of the Future, two very, very iconic projects that you have. But one important thing that we need to discuss is the safety aspect of it. So what are the major safety precautions and measures that were taken during the construction of these projects?
Well, safety is paramount within the industry, and it's particularly so within our actual organisation. We spend a lot of money and a lot of time to ensure the safety of everybody. First and foremost, every meeting, the first thing you discuss is safety. So we use all the technologies available to us.
Okay.
So from our health and safety team on site, who are doing all their checks and balances, shall we say, that everybody is following what they should be doing, to computerization systems so as it can be recorded and tracked, and you get your metrics so as you know what's happening, to using technology on our cranes, for example, so that there's collision detection on all our cranes. There's remote fire alarms throughout the site. All these technologies, again, are just being implemented to improve safety, and at the end of the day, you don't want anybody to be hurt on a site.
Right. Paul, coming to you now again, a few years back, there were a lot of fire incidents reported throughout, which again, there are a number of reasons for that, and we're in the GCC, temperatures are soaring, as you know. But one thing that came with regards to construction or construction companies was the aluminium cladding that was used. So, firstly, there were reports about it being banned. So, is it still banned, or are construction companies in the region still using the aluminium cladding? Is it polyurethane, or what is it called actually?
Well, it's probably a question that I think Dennis could probably answer better, because he's, being a contractor. I think the changes and different standards in the industry, obviously they did come in, but I think there was a certain time where they were still valid.
Again, with everything, the UAE code, fire safety code, was updated last year, and the document has doubled in its size, and the requirements and the checks and balances required on the products that you're using have improved. But this is across the world. It's the same thing is happening. It's happened in America, it happened in the UK and Ireland and in Europe. So as with everything, as you advance in technology and you do new systems, things that we're not necessarily aware of in early days all of a sudden start to become a problem. And the nature of the industry is everything is unique.
Right.
So when we move into a new area and there's a new magic property to solve a problem, it can be 15, 20 years before you find out there's a problem or an issue that needs to be worked on.
There's a catch.
And then once you find that, they action it immediately. Now, so what happens is that the departments actively monitor it and approve all materials. So if a project is in construction, the materials have already been approved. But if a new project starts, then the materials in that project will have to meet with the new regulations.
Right.
Whether or not it's on the cladding or on the carpet or on the stairs or anything. It's as you would get more knowledge, you become safer.
Right.
And if you change things, you must work to the latest regulations.
Right.
And
So
that's a worldwide industry.
But according to the new regulations, again, is there a ban on the particular cladding, the aluminium cladding?
They don't ban a particular product per se. They have a series of standardized international tests that you have to comply with.
All right.
So it's surface flame, like what the temperature is through the product, how does flame spread on the product, does it catch fire? Is that a problem if it does? Because some things can burn but not be an issue because they won't propagate. But if they propagate, it is. So it's a very complex area, and there's a lot of work being done on it.
Right, and another element of safety is, of course, occupational hazards. And again, what is being done by the UAE government and by the construction firms in the country to make sure that occupational hazards and death on site has been reduced?
Nice one, Paul. Nice one.
Good question.
But it's the same principle, right? As an organisation, we are working to the highest of standards. It's not in our interest to have anybody hurt on our site, so we do everything we can, and it's an education process. The biggest thing on sites is you've a lot of labour working in a dangerous environment, and we have to be clear: sites are not as controlled as everything else, but everything is done to make it safe, and by making certain that nobody goes into an area that they don't understand what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Have they got the right safety equipment on? Can we do it a different way to make it safer? These are daily issues that we do every single day. And if you do something and you don't think it's the right way, you say, stop, let's stop and think about it and make it safer.
So from a technology point of view, you can model in those safety factors, where the barriers should be, where hook points should be on high beams that you're crossing.
Right.
So that's part of kind of in the US they have the OSHA standard, and you have to conform in terms of erectability of buildings and make sure you have the right OSHA standards to follow that. So preempting that and getting on site, making sure you've done all those security areas, that's something that you can do in advance of when you get. And then obviously on site it's the process of technologies, as I said earlier, making sure the right people are in the right locations. If he doesn't have a certificate, then why is he there?
Right.
But it's also as well as if an accident does happen, how rapidly can you react to that? Do you know that somebody's fallen over, and where are they located in the building?
Right. All right, great. And the sector is also one of the biggest employers in the region right now. So do you think more job opportunities are going to open up in this sector? Again, I need to ask you this because you're talking about digitization and automation.
Yep.
So I will ask you this first.
I think there's the existing labour force, so it's about retraining on new technologies. So if we look at the contractor sector that I mentioned earlier, we have 3D modelling technologies such as Tekla structures. It's kind of a traditional field right now, but to move them from a traditional 2D to a 3D environment requires retraining. And so any new technology that you put in place, you rather than just get rid of your labour force, because that's nobody wants to lose a job. We have to be, making use of the people that we've gone to the efforts to get those skill sets in the first place. If we're kind of veterans of the industry, let's say, and replacing the industry knowledge is certainly something you shouldn't just replace with technology. So retraining that labour force to do something else. We've got smartphone technologies, we've got lots of different apps now and different ways that people utilising the information. So that is a big part of kind of, I would say, the remobilisation or the reskilling of your labour force.
But by the sounds of it, looks like there is going to be an active move from unskilled labour force that we see more of in the construction sector to skilled labour force. If again they're being trained, they're being taught how to use technology. Do you think that is the case?
Yes. But sure. What I would say is, so we've got the millennials that are there, but there's a huge older generation that are going to be retiring. Right, so passing that knowledge down is going to be one of the key factors of how we upskill the new generation in the industry.
Right.
I suppose, again, the nature, every revolution, we'll call it a revolution of technology, industrial revolution, the technology revolution. The workforce doesn't disappear. What happens is they end up having to work in a different way. The technology is an enabler. So if you're on a site, everybody has a phone. Gone are the days where if there's a problem and you don't know what it is, somebody has to get up, walk all the way down to the site and see it. Now you get a WhatsApp or a phone call and say, this is the problem in a photograph. And there's no thought put into this, it just automatically happens. So technology isn't a barrier, it's more that it's the perception. 10 years ago there wasn't smartphones. And if you say that to people and say it's only 10 years. 10 years ago it was a fax. So what is happening in the industry, on site it is a skilled labour force. It's viewed as an unskilled from a technology point of view, but it's a skilled labour force, whether or not it's a shuttering carpenter or a rebar fixer or a steel fixer or anything else. Because they're not using computer technology doesn't change. That skilled labour force is still required. What is happening is that we're doing more complex buildings. So the skill is in how you get the information to them, and the acceptance of that skilled force as to how to interpret the information. So it's not as easy to see. Museum of the Future, for example, is a very, very complex shape.
Yeah.
How do you give that information to somebody in 2D? A flat drawing and pile of lines. It gives no interpretation of what you're going to see.
Right.
Instead, we have the technology where you can put on a headset and you can see it in 3D. You can see the problem. You can do that with anybody. It doesn't matter who it is on the site. They can interpret it. So our shuttering carpenters are now will to ask their foreman to say, have you checked how this is to be put together? Because I'm looking at the drawing, it's looking difficult. Can it be done? And he can go up to our draftsman, and our draftsman will show him in 3D how it's going to look. So technology is only a tool. It doesn't stop it. It just allows us to do much more complex work.
All right. Clearly an evolution is taking place, not just of technology, not just of the industry, also of the skills and of the labor force that we see today. But thank you so much for joining us in this conversation today. There's so much more to discuss, but unfortunately we're running out of time. But thank you for those valuable insights. I think I have learned a lot today from this discussion, and my viewers have learned too. And thank you for watching AB Live. We will be back again next Tuesday.